Be a skeptical tycoon hated romance. She, a tireless single mum, helped an elderly man at a diner. He, observing, is struck by her purity and genuineness. In that instant, the single mom made him believe in love. Before we start the story, leave a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The alarm clock blared at 5 a.m. as always. Valentina Mendez opened her eyes in the small room she shared with her 5-year-old son, Leo, in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. The boy was sound asleep. His dark curls spread across the pillow, a serene expression that contrasted with the rush that awaited them. Valentina got up silently, her bare feet touching the cold linoleum floor. On the other side of the thin wall, she could hear the heavy breathing of her mother, Celia, who at 72 battled arthritis that kept her increasingly dependent. 3 women in a space that barely accommodated a family, but it was what they had, and Valentina had learned to be grateful for what she possessed. In the tiny bathroom, she looked at herself in the mirror while tying her brown hair in a neat bun. At 32, she still possessed the natural beauty she inherited from her mother, but her brown eyes carried a premature maturity, marked by the responsibilities she had assumed too early. There was no time for vanity or self-pity. Leo needed breakfast, Celia needed her medication, and the bus to Manhattan waited for no one. While preparing the watery coffee with milk and the 2 slices of toast they would divide among the 3 of them, Valentina mentally crunched the numbers. Her salary as a coffee server in the office on the 12th floor of the Chrysler building in Midtown barely covered the rent, her mother's medicine, and basic expenses. The child support money from Leo's father never arrived. He had disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy, leaving only empty promises and a phone number that no longer worked. "Mommy, can I have chocolate milk today?" Leo's sleepy voice interrupted her calculations. The boy appeared in the kitchen in his Spider-Man pajamas, his eyes still swollen with sleep, but with that smile that melted away any worry. "Not today, my love. But how about we make a deal? If you're a well-behaved boy with Grandma today, we'll buy chocolate milk this weekend, okay?" Valentina crouched down to his level, kissing his warm forehead. Leo nodded enthusiastically and ran to wake up his grandmother with loud kisses. Celia grumbled but smiled as she hugged her grandson. Valentina watched the scene while packing her lunch bag for work, storing the Tupperware that would be her lunch and dinner. That image was worth more than any material wealth. The morning rush began at 6:30. Dropping Leo off at public school, helping Celia with her bath and medication, taking 2 buses to Midtown, always hoping not to be late. Valentina knew every curve of the route, every pothole in the road, every face of the regular passengers. It was a routine that had been repeating for 3 years, since she got the job through a former schoolmate. At the Vasconcelos Investments office, Valentina was practically invisible. She arrived before everyone else, prepared the coffee, organized the meeting rooms, served water and coffee to executives who barely noticed her presence. She wore her navy blue uniform impeccably, her hair always tied up, the cordial smile she had perfected to deal with the indifference of a world that was not hers. The work was decent, but she knew her place. She overheard conversations about investments that were worth more than she would earn in a lifetime. Witnessed decisions that moved millions while worrying about the pennies left over at the end of the month. There was no bitterness in her heart, just a clear awareness of her place in that hierarchy. During her lunch break, Valentina went down to the food court of the shopping mall attached to the building. Not to buy anything, but to save a few dollars on transportation, walking instead of taking the bus. She sat on any bench and ate her lunch, observing the people. Well-dressed executives, elegant secretaries, all living at a pace she knew from afar. It was on one of those afternoons that her phone rang. It was Leo's school principal. "Mrs. Mendez, you need to come pick up Leo. He's sick, he has a high fever." Her heart raced. Valentina looked at the clock, 2 in the afternoon. She still had 4 hours of work, an important meeting to organize, reports to deliver. But Leo was sick and there was no one else. "I'm on my way," she replied without hesitating. She ran up to the 12th floor, knocked on the supervisor's door. Mrs. Davis, a middle-aged woman who had always been fair with her, listened to the explanation with a sympathetic expression. "Go, Valentina, but you know I can't deduct the half-day from your leave. You'll have to make up the hours." "I know, Mrs. Davis, thank you very much." Valentina grabbed her bag and ran out. On the crowded bus, she prayed silently that it wasn't anything serious. Leo was all she had, her reason for existing, her strength to continue. The boy had been born when she was 27, at a time in her life when she believed in eternal love and happy endings. Reality had shown her that happy endings needed to be conquered day after day, with work, dedication, and lots of love. At school, she found Leo slumped in the teacher's lap, his cheeks flushed with fever. Her heart ached, but she remained calm. It would be another sleepless night, a few more difficult days, more medicine to buy with money she didn't have. But that's what mothers did, and she would do it as many times as necessary. She carried her son in her arms to the bus stop, feeling his warm little body against her chest. Leo murmured, "Mommy," and snuggled closer. At that moment, observing the bustle of the big city, Valentina renewed the silent promise she made every day. She would give this boy all the love that the world had denied him. She would build a better future for him, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams. She didn't know yet that her life was about to change completely. Richard Vasconcelos adjusted the cuffs of his Italian shirt while observing the hustle and bustle of Midtown through the panoramic window of his office on the 30th floor. At 39, he commanded an investment empire that he had built himself, starting from a small financial consultancy to becoming one of the most respected minds in the American market. Success had a price, and he knew every penny charged by loneliness. That Thursday morning, after a series of meetings that resulted in multi-million-dollar acquisitions, Richard felt the familiar weight of emptiness. The numbers on the computer screen danced before his tired eyes. Stratospheric profits, diversified portfolios, returns that would impress any investor, but nothing that warmed the heart he had learned to shield from disappointment. His cell phone vibrated with a message from his personal assistant. "Your mother called again about Saturday's dinner. Mrs. Vasconcelos is insisting on you meeting Judge Miller's daughter." Richard sighed deeply. Another arranged meeting, another woman interested in his wealth and social status. He had been through so many of these social rituals that he could predict every move, the calculated smile, the questions about his business, the well-rehearsed compliments, all culminating in empty relationships that lasted only as long as the conveniences aligned. He decided to go down to the coffee shop on the ground floor of the building. It was a recent habit, an attempt to break the suffocating routine of meetings and spreadsheets. There he observed life happening at its natural pace, far from corporate formalities. Ordinary people living their ordinary lives, something that seemed increasingly distant to him. The coffee shop was busy at lunchtime. Executives discussed business, secretaries took advantage of the break to relax. Delivery guys rushed against the clock. Richard ordered an espresso and settled at a table in the corner from where he could observe without being noticed. His eyes scanned the room with the same skepticism he applied to financial reports, looking for something he couldn't define. That's when he saw her. Valentina was behind the counter, serving coffees with silent efficiency. She wore the navy blue uniform of the building's coffee service, her hair tied in a neat bun. Richard vaguely recognized her. He had seen her a few times in the office, always discreet, always professional. But he had never really noticed her, as he never noticed most of the people who orbited his routine. At that moment, an elderly man of about 80 entered the coffee shop. Mr. Johnson was known in the building, a retiree who lived in the neighborhood and frequented the place every day to have his coffee and read the newspaper. But that day, something was different. His movements seemed confused, his eyes lost, as if he didn't recognize the familiar environment. The elderly man approached the counter, staggering, trying to order his usual coffee, but the words came out jumbled. Some people watched him impatiently, others looked away, embarrassed. An executive commented quietly to his colleague about these old folks who don't know when they should stay home. Richard continued to observe, curious to see how the situation would unfold. That's when Valentina acted. Without hesitation, she went around the counter and approached the elderly man with a genuine and warm smile. Her hands gently touched his arm, and her voice sounded soft and patient. "Mr. Johnson, how are you today? How about we sit down for a bit?" She carefully guided him to a nearby chair, completely ignoring the impatient looks of the other customers and the line that was forming at the counter. She knelt beside the chair, getting at the elderly man's eye level, and began to talk to him in a low and reassuring tone. "Are you feeling well? Do you want me to call someone? Where do your family members live?" Mr. Johnson seemed increasingly disoriented. At one point, he tried to get up abruptly and knocked over the salt shaker and some napkins that were on the table. The noise drew more eyes, some of irritation, others of pity. Valentina showed no sign of impatience. On the contrary, her voice became even sweeter. "It's okay, Mr. Johnson, don't worry about it. Let's clean up together, okay?" She bent down and began to pick up the spilled salt and napkins, talking all the time to the elderly man about simple subjects. The weather, the neighborhood where he lived, his plants in the backyard. Gradually, the man began to calm down, answering the questions more clearly. Richard was mesmerized. He watched every gesture of Valentina, every inflection of her voice, every look of genuine concern. There was no performance, there was no hidden interest, there was no expectation of return. It was pure kindness in its most crystalline form. When she finally managed to calm the elderly man and help him drink his coffee, Valentina still stayed a few minutes talking to him, making sure he was okay. Only then did she return to the counter, where a considerable line had formed. She apologized to each customer, serving everyone with the same kindness she had dedicated to Mr. Johnson. At that moment, something broke inside Richard's chest. It was as if a wall of ice he had built around his heart began to melt. For the first time in years, he was seeing something real, something true, something that could not be bought, sold, or traded. The woman before him possessed a wealth that he had never imagined existed. It was not the gold that shone, but the soul. It was not jewelry that adorned, but the compassion that radiated. In the world where everything had a price, she offered her time and care freely to a stranger that no one else noticed. Richard remained in the coffee shop far beyond the time he had planned, watching Valentina work. Every smile she offered to the customers, every sincere thank you, every gesture of delicacy touched him deeply. For the first time in his adult life, he was seeing love in its purest form. Not romantic love, but love for humanity, the ability to genuinely care about the well-being of others. When he finally went up to the office, Richard couldn't get that image out of his head. The woman in the navy blue uniform had done something that no socialite, no successful executive, no millionaire heiress had managed. She had made him believe that there was still genuine goodness in the world. And if there was genuine goodness, maybe true love also existed. Maybe he was just looking in the wrong places, among the wrong people. Maybe the answer to his loneliness was just a few floors away, serving coffee and spreading light without even knowing the impact she caused. The next morning, Richard broke a 15-year routine. Instead of having his usual coffee in the office, served promptly at 8 o'clock by his secretary, he went down again to the coffee shop on the ground floor. He invented an excuse about needing a break to think about an investment strategy, but the truth was much simpler and scarier. He needed to see Valentina again. She was there, organizing the cups behind the counter with the same silent efficiency as the day before. Richard ordered an espresso, something he could have done anywhere in the building, and sat at the same corner table. He discreetly observed as she served customers, noticing details that had gone unnoticed before, the way she meticulously cleaned each surface, how she memorized the preferences of regular customers, how her smile was genuine even when she was clearly tired. On the third day of this new routine, Valentina noticed him. Their eyes met for a brief second while she was wiping a nearby table, and Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: nervousness. She quickly looked away, but he noticed a slight curiosity in her expression. Why was that elegant executive frequenting the coffee shop every day? Richard decided to take the first real step on Friday. He approached the counter during a lull, and for the first time in years, found himself stammering like a teenager. "Good morning. You also work in the office on the 12th floor, right?" Valentina recognized him immediately. It was impossible not to recognize Richard Vasconcelos. His photo was in business magazines, financial newspapers, and everyone in the building knew who owned the company. She straightened up instinctively, assuming the professional posture she had perfected. "Good morning, Mr. Vasconcelos. Yes, I work in the coffee service of your office. How can I help you?" The formality in her voice completely disarmed him. Richard was used to people who melted before his status, who approached with interested smiles and calculated conversations. But Valentina maintained a respectful, almost cautious distance, as if she were wondering what a man like him could want with someone like her. "I wanted to thank you for what you did for Mr. Johnson a few days ago. It was very kind of you." Valentina blinked, surprised. She didn't expect anyone to have noticed, let alone remember. "It was nothing, sir. Mr. Johnson is a sweet man. Sometimes he gets a little confused, but he's a special person." "Special," Richard repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, I imagine you have a special talent for recognizing that in people." There was an awkward pause. Valentina didn't know how to react to what seemed to be a compliment, and Richard realized he was being clumsy. He who commanded meetings with dozens of executives, who negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts with the confidence of someone born to lead, was struggling to talk to a woman who stirred something deep in his soul. In the days that followed, Richard intensified his visits to the coffee shop. He even invented excuses to go down. He needed a different environment to think. He wanted to follow the building's traffic. He was testing the quality of the coffee for corporate events. His secretaries began to find it strange, but they didn't dare question the boss's eccentricities. Valentina, in turn, began to be intrigued and slightly uncomfortable. It was not common for a businessman of such caliber to frequent the coffee shop so regularly, and even less common was the way he looked at her. It wasn't the predatory look she sometimes received from other men, nor the look of contempt she knew well. It was something different, almost reverent, as if she were something precious he was discovering. The first time Richard dared to have a longer conversation was on a Monday afternoon, when the coffee shop was practically empty. He approached the counter pretending to study the sandwich menu, although he already knew it by heart. "Do you have children?" he asked suddenly, surprising himself with the intimacy of the question. Valentina hesitated. It was a personal question coming from someone who, technically, was in a hierarchical position much higher than hers. But there was something in the way he asked, a genuine curiosity mixed with delicacy, that made her answer. "I have a son. Leo, 5 years old." Richard's eyes lit up. 5 years old. Must be an interesting age. Full of questions about the world, I imagine. "Many questions," Valentina confirmed with an involuntary smile. "Sometimes I think he asks more questions in one day than I could answer in a week." "And the father?" The question came out before Richard could control himself, and he immediately regretted the intrusion. Valentina stiffened slightly. "He's not part of our lives." Richard realized he had stepped on delicate ground and quickly changed the subject. But crucial information had been processed. She was alone, raising a child alone. The admiration he felt for her grew exponentially. A woman who worked tirelessly to support a child, who still found the energy to be kind to strangers, who radiated goodness, even carrying responsibilities that would crush many people. From that day on, Richard began to leave small signs of his growing fascination. He arrived at the coffee shop always at the time he knew she would be there. He memorized her routine, her break times, the way she organized her work. He began to specifically ask to be served by her when he went up to the office for meetings, inventing needs for coffee or water at strategic moments. Valentina noticed everything, of course. It was impossible to ignore the constant attention of a man like Richard Vasconcelos. She felt confused, divided between the natural fear of someone in her social position and a growing curiosity about his intentions. There was something different in his eyes, a vulnerability that contrasted completely with the public image of the ruthless businessman. One afternoon, when she was cleaning the coffee shop tables, Richard approached with 2 cups of coffee in his hand. "Can I sit down?" he asked, indicating the chair in front of her. Valentina looked around, nervous. Some customers began to watch the scene with curiosity. "Mr. Vasconcelos, I'm working just 5 minutes," he insisted with a kindness that disarmed her. "Please." She nodded hesitantly and sat on the edge of the chair, clearly uncomfortable. Richard pushed one of the cups in her direction. "Coffee with milk, no sugar. I noticed that's how you like it." The simple fact that he had paid attention to such a small detail about her made Valentina's heart race. Nobody noticed how she drank coffee. Nobody cared about her preferences. She was just part of the scenery, invisible in the routine of important people. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping her hands around the heated cup. They drank in silence for a few moments, and Valentina wondered what a man like him could want with someone like her. The answer, she would soon discover, would completely change the course of her life. The gossip started in the 2nd week of October. First, there were discreet whispers among the cleaning staff, then veiled comments in the elevator until they reached the ears of Mrs. Davis, the supervisor of the general services sector. Valentina was organizing the pantry supplies when the supervisor knocked on the door with a serious expression she knew all too well. It was the same face Mrs. Davis made when she was going to fire someone. "Valentina, I need to talk to you." Her heart raced immediately. In recent days, she had noticed strange looks from colleagues, conversations that stopped when she approached, strained smiles that didn't reach the eyes. She knew that her growing proximity to Richard was not going unnoticed. "Sit down," said Mrs. Davis, closing the door. "Some comments have come to my attention about your relationship with Mr. Vasconcelos." Relationship? Valentina tried to keep her voice steady, but she knew she was trembling. "Mrs. Davis, there is no relationship. Valentina, you know I like you. You are a dedicated employee. You have never given me problems. But I need to be clear. There are people commenting that you are receiving special treatment from the boss, that you are taking advantage of the situation." The words hit Valentina like a punch to the stomach. Special treatment. Taking advantage. The accusations that every woman in her position feared hearing, that could destroy a reputation built with years of honest work. "That's not true," she whispered. "I never would ever do such a thing." "I know that," sighed Mrs. Davis, "but perception is everything in this place. And the perception is that Mr. Vasconcelos is demonstrating a special interest in you. He specifically asks for you in meetings, goes down to the coffee shop every day, has been seen talking to you during work hours." Each word was a stone being piled on Valentina's chest. She thought of Leo, Celia's medication, the rent due at the end of the month. She couldn't lose that job. It was all she had. "What are you asking me to do?" "Maintain a professional distance. Be polite but formal. Don't give room for interpretations." Mrs. Davis paused, studying Valentina's dejected face. "And consider requesting a transfer to another floor. I can get you a position at the front desk on the ground floor." Transfer. She avoided the word as if she were being punished for something she didn't even quite know what it was. Richard had been kind to her. Was that a crime? Had he talked to her as if she were a person, not just an invisible employee? Did that justify questioning her integrity? That afternoon, when Richard went down to the coffee shop as usual, Valentina avoided him completely. She asked her colleague Rosangela to serve him, stayed busy organizing non-existent stock, cleaning already clean surfaces. He immediately noticed the change and tried to get her attention, but she kept her eyes down, her heart breaking every second. The next morning, Richard went up to the office. earlier than usual and asked to speak to Mrs. Davis. I would like to understand why the employee Valentina is avoiding serving me. Mrs. Davis squirmed uncomfortably in her chair. Explaining to one of the most powerful men in the building that there were gossips about him was not exactly part of her job description. Mr. Vasconcelos, perhaps it is best to maintain a more professional relationship with the employees, to avoid misunderstandings. The implication hit Richard like a slap. Misunderstandings. He knew that corporate language. He knew exactly what was being suggested. That he was harassing an employee, using his position of power inappropriately. The idea revolted him deeply. What kind of misunderstandings? He asked, his voice dangerously low. Well, there are comments. People saying that Miss Valentina may be receiving special favors. Richard felt the anger rise in his chest. Not anger at Valentina, but anger at a system that turned kindness into suspicion, that did not allow a hard-working woman to be treated with respect without it being interpreted as something sordid. And do you believe these comments? I know Valentina, sir. She is an upright person, but she needs this job, Mr. Vasconcelos. She has a young son, a sick mother. She cannot afford to be the target of gossip. The reality of the situation fell on Richard like an avalanche. His approach, which for him was pure and motivated by genuine feelings, was harming exactly the person he most wanted to protect. Valentina was being penalized for something he had started, was risking her financial stability because of his feelings. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He walked through the penthouse of his apartment in the Upper East Side, watching the city lights, wondering how something so beautiful had become so complicated. For the first time in his adult life, he genuinely cared about someone, and that feeling was causing exactly the opposite of what he wanted. Valentina also didn't sleep. Sitting in the kitchen of the small apartment after Leo and Celia were already asleep, she cried silently over a cup of cold tea. She didn't understand what was happening to her. Why did Richard's attention affect her so much? Why did she miss the brief conversations, the kind looks, the way he made her feel seen, important? But the reality was cruel. She was a coffee server, he was a millionaire. She had responsibilities, he had a whole world of possibilities. The attraction she felt for him, and that she finally admitted to herself, was a luxury she couldn't afford. The next morning, Valentina made the most difficult decision of her life. She approached Mrs. Davis and requested the transfer to the front desk. When questioned about the reason, she lied, "I think it will be better for my career to have direct contact with the public." Mrs. Davis nodded, relieved. It would be easier for everyone if Valentina simply disappeared from Richard Vasconcelos's radar. Richard discovered the transfer in the late afternoon when he went down to the coffee shop and found only Rosangela behind the counter. When he asked about Valentina, the answer was like a stab. "Oh, she requested a transfer, sir. She's going to work at the front desk now." He went up to the office, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years. Defeat. For the first time in his brilliant career, he had failed at something important. He had hurt the only person who really mattered, and now she was running away from him. Sitting before the panoramic window, watching the city traffic, Richard wondered if it wouldn't be better to give up. If maybe Valentina wasn't right in walking away. If someone like him really had the right to disturb the life of someone like her. For the first time since he saw her caring for Mr. Johnson, he questioned whether it was worth continuing to fight for something that seemed impossible. Though 2 weeks had passed since Valentina's transfer to the front desk on the ground floor. She had quickly adapted to the new environment, attending to visitors, directing calls, organizing the meeting schedule. The work was less physically demanding, but the salary remained the same, and she missed the familiar routine of the coffee service. More than that, she missed something she couldn't name. In her moments of pause, her eyes unconsciously searched for Richard's elegant figure through the corridors. But he had returned to his previous routine, remaining confined to the 30th floor like a king in his tower. Richard, in turn, tried to convince himself that he had made the right decision by respecting the distance. He had returned to business lunches, endless meetings, the reports that used to completely fill his days. But life had lost a color he didn't even know existed before meeting Valentina. Professional success, which had always been enough, now seemed empty and pointless. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that fate decided to intervene. Valentina was organizing some documents at the front desk when she heard a commotion at the main entrance. She immediately recognized the trembling and confused voice. It was Mr. Johnson, the elderly man from the coffee shop. He seemed even more disoriented than the last time, trying to explain to the security guard that he needed to find the kind lady who always helped him. She worked up there, or down here. I don't know where anymore, babbled the elderly man, his hands shaking as he tried to explain himself. I need to thank her. My daughter came to visit me because of her. The security guard, a young and impatient man, clearly didn't understand the situation and was already preparing to escort Mr. Johnson out when Valentina approached. Mr. Johnson, she called with genuine joy. How are you? The elderly man's face lit up at seeing her. My dear girl, I was looking for you. I have something important to tell you. Valentina excused herself to the security guard and guided Mr. Johnson to one of the armchairs in the reception area, kneeling beside him exactly as she had done in the coffee shop weeks before. Tell me everything, Mr. Johnson. Remember that day I was confused in the coffee shop? You helped me. You were so kind to me. The elderly man's eyes shone with tears of gratitude. When I got home, my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, saw how I was. She called my daughter Lisa, who lives upstate. Valentina listened attentively, holding Mr. Johnson's trembling hands. Lisa came to see me the next day. We hadn't spoken for 2 years because of a silly argument. She said that the neighbor told her how an unknown lady had taken care of me, and that made her realize that maybe I really needed help. The elderly man's voice choked with emotion. Now she comes to visit me every week. We're talking about me moving closer to her. All this because you cared about me that day. You had no idea how a simple gesture can change an entire life. Valentina felt her eyes watering. Mr. Johnson, I just did what anyone would do. No, my dear. You did what anyone should do, but that few do. You have a heart of gold, and I came here to thank you. It was at this moment that Richard appeared on the ground floor. He had come down for a meeting with external investors and stopped abruptly upon seeing Valentina kneeling beside Mr. Johnson, both hands enveloping his hands, listening attentively to every word with the same infinite patience she had shown weeks before. The scene immediately transported him back to that first day in the coffee shop. There was the same extraordinary woman, offering the same genuine compassion, radiating the same light that had illuminated his gray world. But there was something more now. He could see the real impact of her kindness. Mr. Johnson was not just a stranger she had helped. He was a life she had touched, a family she had reunited through a simple act of kindness. Richard remained observing from afar, hidden behind a column, while Mr. Johnson continued his account. The elderly man spoke about how Valentina's kindness had been the catalyst for the reconciliation with his daughter, how a moment of compassion had turned into a chain of family love. You know, my dear, said Mr. Johnson, there are people in this world who are born to make a difference. You are one of those people. No matter where you are, you will always find a way to make the lives of others better. Valentina shook her head, embarrassed by the compliments, but Richard could see that she was touched by the elderly man's gratitude. You don't need to thank me, Mr. Johnson. It makes me happy to know you're okay. And you, my dear, are you happy? The question caught Valentina off guard. She hesitated, and Richard noticed the shadow that passed through her eyes. I'm okay, Mr. Johnson. Okay is not the same as happy, observed the elderly man with the wisdom of years. A young woman like you deserves to be very happy. Deserves someone who sees the treasure you are. At that moment, Richard felt something rekindle within his chest. It was as if Mr. Johnson was speaking directly to him, reminding him of something fundamental he had forgotten amid the social pressures and gossips. Valentina was, in fact, a treasure. And treasures shouldn't be hidden or driven away. They should be valued, protected, celebrated. For the first time in weeks, Richard felt that maybe he shouldn't give up. Maybe the problem wasn't his feelings for Valentina, but the way he was dealing with them. Maybe instead of walking away to protect her, he should find a way to be by her side, to face together the obstacles that the world placed in their path. Mr. Johnson got up, kissed Valentina's forehead with paternal affection, and left, leaving her alone in the reception area with a melancholic smile on her face. Richard remained observing for a few more minutes, and when she returned to work, organizing papers with the same dedication as always, he made a decision. He couldn't simply give up on the best thing that had happened in his life. Valentina deserved to be fought for, deserved someone who wasn't afraid to show the world how much she was worth. And if the world had prejudices, if people had poisonous tongues, then it was time to show them exactly who they were messing with. It was time to stop running and start fighting. On the Monday following the meeting with Mr. Johnson, Richard made the boldest decision of his life. He could no longer live pretending that Valentina didn't exist. He could no longer accept that social conventions dictated his feelings. If he was going to fight for her, he would do it the way he knew, head on, without subterfuge. He went down to the reception area in the middle of the morning when the lobby was bustling. Valentina was taking a call when he approached, and her eyes widened upon seeing him. She ended the call quickly, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Vasconcelos, how can I help you?" "I would like to invite you to lunch," he said bluntly, his voice clear enough for the people around to hear. The silence that followed was deafening. Valentina felt the blood drain from her face. Some people in the lobby stopped to watch the scene. Whispers began to spread like concentric waves. "Mr. Vasconcelos, I'm working. It's a personal invitation, Valentina. Not professional." The way he said her name, with an intimacy that couldn't be denied, made her heart race and simultaneously filled her with panic. He was making public something she had tried desperately to keep discreet. "I can't accept," she murmured, her eyes downcast. "Why not?" The simple question carried the weight of everything they couldn't say. Why not? Because she was a coffee server and he was a millionaire. Because she had a son to raise and couldn't afford to lose her job. Because the world didn't forgive women like her who dared to dream big. Because it wouldn't be appropriate. Richard wanted to insist, wanted to break down all the barriers at that moment, but he saw the despair in her eyes and retreated. He nodded formally and walked away, leaving Valentina trembling behind the reception desk as the whispers intensified around her. The news of the public proposal reached Helena Vasconcelos' ears even before the end of the day. The family matriarch called her son with a voice filled with indignation. "Richard, I need to talk to you now." The meeting took place in his mother's apartment on Park Avenue, an impeccable penthouse that reflected decades of good taste and social status. Helena was accompanied by Rodrigo, Richard's younger brother, and Clara Miller, the judge's daughter, whom they had been trying to push on him for months. "Sit down," ordered Helena, her voice icy. "Comments have reached my ears that are absolutely inadmissible regarding your behavior." Richard knew exactly what it was about, but kept his expression neutral. "What comments?" "Don't play dumb. They're saying you're pursuing an employee, a coffee server, for God's sake." "I'm not pursuing anyone. I just expressed interest in getting to know better someone for whom I have appreciation." "Appreciation?" Rodrigo laughed with disdain. "Richard, do you have any idea of the repercussions this can have on our business? Clara has been here waiting for months for a definition from you, and you're behaving like a teenager." Clara, an elegant woman in her early 30s, watched everything in silence, clearly embarrassed to be used as a family argument. "With all due respect," said Richard coldly, "my personal life is not up for negotiation." "Your personal life?" Helena stood up, her voice rising an octave. You are a Vasconcelos. Your name is on buildings, on companies, on newspapers. There is no personal life separate from your social responsibility. And what responsibility is that? To marry who you choose. To fake feelings I don't have? Marry someone from your social class, your educational level, who understands the world you live in, exploded Helena. That employee has a child, Richard. Do you want to be the father of another man's child? Do you want to become a laughingstock at the country club? Each word was a precise bullet into Richard's deepest fears. Not about Valentina, about her he was sure, but about his ability to protect her from exactly this kind of venom. Meanwhile, in the small apartment in the Bronx, Valentina faced her own storm. Celia had noticed that something was wrong with her daughter since she arrived from work, pale and trembling. "Tell your mother what's happening." Valentina tried to minimize, but ended up breaking down. She told about Richard, about the attention he gave her, about the public invitation that morning, about the looks and whispers of her colleagues. "Daughter," said Celia sadly, "you know that men like that don't play with women like us." "It's not a game, Mum. I see it in his eyes." "You see what you want to see. But when the fun is over, he'll go back to his world, and you'll be left here unemployed and defamed." Her mother's words echoed Valentina's own fears. And things got worse the next morning. Mrs. Davis called her in at the beginning of her shift, accompanied by 2 men from the Human Resources Department. The conversation was direct and devastating. "Valentina, we received an anonymous complaint about inappropriate conduct in the workplace. They allege that you are using your position to get close to company executives." The ground disappeared from under her feet. "That's not true." "We know that," said one of the HR men. "But the company needs to protect itself legally. We're going to have to open an investigative process." "What does that mean?" "It means that you will be suspended without pay until the investigation is concluded. It could take weeks, maybe months." Valentina felt the world collapse. Without a salary, she wouldn't be able to pay the rent, her mother's medicine, Leo's school. Everything she had fought for her entire life was being destroyed. That night, sitting in the kitchen after Leo fell asleep, she made the most painful decision of her life. She wrote a letter to Richard, which she would deliver in the morning. "Mr. Vasconcelos, I ask that you stop trying to approach me. Our worlds are too different, and your attention is costing me my survival. I have a son to raise, and I cannot afford to dream of impossibilities. Please leave me alone." On the other side of the city, Richard spent the night sleepless, looking at the Manhattan skyline. The words of his family echoed in his mind, mixing with the image of despair in Valentina's eyes when he had invited her to lunch. For the first time since he had met her, he questioned whether it wouldn't be better to give up for good. If maybe his mother wasn't right, he was being selfish, putting his feelings above Valentina's well-being. Maybe love sometimes meant letting go. The two were, each in their corner of the city, facing the same devastating truth. Sometimes loving meant accepting that love wasn't enough. The letter reached Richard's hands on Wednesday morning, delivered discreetly by an office boy in the elevator. When he recognized the careful handwriting on the envelope, his heart raced. For a moment, he allowed himself the illusion that Valentina had changed her mind about lunch. Reality was a punch to the stomach. He read the words once, twice, 3 times, each phrase sinking deeper into his chest. "Leave me alone." The final 4 words echoed in his mind like a death sentence. Valentina was asking him to disappear from her life, and he knew she had every right to do so. He crumpled the letter tightly, but soon smoothed it out again, keeping it in his desk drawer. During the rest of the day, he pretended to work, signed documents without reading, attended meetings without listening. His mind was completely focused on the woman who had given up on him before they even had a real chance. It was only in the late afternoon that Richard decided to find out the truth. He called Mrs. Davis and asked to speak with her privately. Was the employee, Valentina Mendez, actually suspended from work? Mrs. Davis hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Vasconcelos, there was a complaint." What kind of complaint? Inappropriate conduct. Allegations that she was taking advantage of her position to get close to executives. Richard felt a cold anger rise in his chest. And you believe that? It's not a question of believing, sir. It's company protocol. Any complaint needs to be investigated. Who made the complaint? It was anonymous. Mrs. Davis. Richard's voice became dangerously low. I need to know who destroyed the reputation of an exemplary employee based on lies. The supervisor swallowed hard. She had known Richard for years, knew when he was truly furious. I can try to find out. 2 hours later, Richard had his answer. The complaint had come from Clara Miller, the judge's daughter, whom his family so desperately wanted to push on him. Clara had used internal contacts to create the process that had suspended Valentina, all with the veiled approval of Helena Vasconcelos. At that moment, looking out the office window as the sun set over Manhattan, Richard made the most important decision of his life. It wasn't just social pressures that were destroying his chance at happiness. It was a conspiracy orchestrated by his own family to force him to accept the destiny they had planned for him. For 39 years, he had been the obedient son, the responsible heir, the man who put the family's interests above his own desires. But Valentina had awakened something in him that could no longer be stifled, the courage to be truly himself. The next morning, Richard arrived at the office with a determination he hadn't felt in years. First task, reverse Valentina's suspension. He personally called the director of human resources. Robert, I want the investigation into Valentina Mendez to be dropped immediately. Mr. Vasconcelos, the protocol requires that the CEO of the company be obeyed. Drop the case and reinstate the employee today. But sir, if the complaint proceeds, the complaint is false, Robert. And if I find out that someone within the company collaborated with this slander, that person will be fired for just cause. Is that clear? Second task, confront Clara Miller. He called her directly. Clara, I need to talk to you now. They met at a hotel cafe downtown. Clara arrived with a confident smile that quickly withered when she saw Richard's expression. You made the complaint against Valentina Mendez. It wasn't a question. Clara tried to deny it, but Richard cut her off. Don't lie to me. I know exactly what you did, who you talked to, how you gained access to the company's internal information. Clara sighed, the mask of innocence falling completely. Your mother asked me for help, Richard. She's worried about you. My mother asked you to destroy the life of an innocent woman? Asked me to protect you from a mistake that could cost your reputation. Richard leaned over the table, his eyes flashing with controlled fury. Clara, I'm going to be very clear. If you or anyone in your family tries to harm Valentina again, I will not only make public what you did, but I will use all the legal resources at my disposal to sue you for defamation and harassment. Understood? Clara nodded pale. Third and most difficult task, confront his family. Richard scheduled a dinner at his mother's house for that same night. Helena, Rodrigo, and even some aunts and cousins showed up, clearly expecting a capitulation, an announcement that he had come to his senses. Instead, Richard stood up in the middle of dinner and made an announcement that left everyone in shock. I want everyone to know that I am in love with an extraordinary woman named Valentina Mendez. She is a coffee server, a single mother, and the most upright person I have ever met. I also want you to know that I discovered the dirty campaign you orchestrated to remove her from my life. The silence in the room was sepulchral. Mother, he continued, looking directly at Helena, you raised a son to be successful in business, but you forgot to teach me that success without love is just a gilded cage. Helena tried to protest, but Richard raised his hand. I'm not finished. You can accept my choice. You can learn to respect the woman I love, or you can lose me forever. Because I will no longer sacrifice my happiness for your prejudices. He headed to the door, but stopped before leaving. And if any of you try to harm Valentina again, you will find that I can be much more ruthless in business than you imagine." He left the house, leaving his family in a state of total shock. But he knew that the real battle had not yet begun. Now he needed to regain Valentina's trust, prove that he was willing to fight for her against the entire world. And for the first time in weeks, he felt that he had a real chance of winning. On Friday morning, Valentina woke up with a heavy heart. It had been 3 days since she was suspended from work, 3 days living with the anguish of not knowing how she would pay the bills at the end of the month. Leo had asked why she was always sad, and she didn't know what to answer a 5-year-old boy about the cruelties of the adult world. The phone rang at 9 o'clock. It was Mrs. Davis. "Valentina, I need you to come to the office today. There's news about your case." Her heart raced. News could be good or bad, but at least it was a definition. She put on her best clothes, kissed Leo, and left for what she believed could be her last day as an employee of Vasconcelos Investments. She arrived at the building and went straight to the 12th floor, where Mrs. Davis was waiting for her, with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Sit down, Valentina. The investigative process has been dropped." She blinked, not understanding. "Dropped?" The complaint was deemed unfounded. "You are reinstated to your position with the right to the salary of the days lost." Valentina felt her legs tremble. How did this happen? Direct order from Mr. Vasconcelos. His name made her heart skip a beat, but she tried to maintain her composure. Did he say anything? Said he knows your character and would never believe unfounded accusations against you. Before Valentina could completely process the information, Mrs. Davis continued, "Oh, and he asked you to go to his office as soon as you arrive." Valentina's blood ran cold. After everything that had happened, after the letter she had written asking to be left alone, she didn't know how to face Richard. She went up to the 30th floor with wobbly legs. The secretary led her directly to the office, where Richard was standing before the panoramic window, contemplating the city. "Valentina," he said without turning around, "thank you for coming. Mr. Vasconcelos, Please, let me speak first." He turned around and she saw something different in his eyes. A determination, a peace that wasn't there before. "I found out who made the complaint against you." Valentina's eyes widened. "It was Clara Miller, the judge's daughter, encouraged by my mother. They thought that by destroying your reputation, they could drive me away from you." The revelation hit her like a lightning bolt. Why are you telling me this?" Richard approached her, stopping at a respectful distance. "Because you need to know the truth. You weren't suspended for having done something wrong. You were suspended because I fell in love with you, and my family couldn't accept that." The words hung in the air between them. Valentina felt her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "And now?" she asked in a whisper. "Now I've made a choice." Richard took a deep breath. "I chose you, Valentina. I chose what I feel for you above all social conventions, above my family's approval, above everything." "Mr. Vasconcelos." "Richard. My name is Richard." He took another step closer. "And I want you to know that everything I feel for you is real. It's not curiosity. It's not whim. It's not a bored rich man's game. It's love." Tears began to run down Valentina's face. "You don't understand. Our worlds are too different." "They're not," he interrupted gently. "You live in the world of compassion, generosity, true love. I lived in the world of money, status, appearances. But you showed me that there is a much greater wealth than I ever imagined possessing." Richard knelt before her, exactly as she had done with Mr. Johnson on the day he fell in love. "Valentina Mendez, you taught me to see the true value of things. You taught me that kindness is worth more than gold, that compassion is more precious than diamonds. You, a woman who cares about an unknown elderly man, who works tirelessly for her son, who treats each person with dignity. You are the richest woman I've ever known." He took her hands. "I love you. I love your strength. I love your kindness. I love the dedicated mother you are." And if you let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you were the best thing that ever happened to me." Valentina was crying openly now. For so long she had believed that she didn't deserve love, that her life of struggle and responsibilities left no room for dreams. But there was a man who saw her, who saw value in her when even she didn't see it herself. "And Leo?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Leo is part of you, so he's part of me. I want to meet him. I want to be someone he can trust, someone who will protect you both forever. And your family. My family will learn to respect us, or they will lose a son. The choice is theirs." Valentina looked into Richard's eyes and saw the same sincerity she had seen when he thanked her for her kindness to Mr. Johnson. She saw the man who had fallen in love not for her beauty or youth, but for her soul. "I love you too," she whispered finally. "I'm afraid, but I love you." Richard stood up and enveloped her in his arms, and for the first time in her adult life, Valentina felt truly safe. There was the man who had fought for her, who had faced his own family, who had chosen love above all conventions. "You don't have to be afraid," he murmured in her ear. "We'll face everything together." 6 months later, in the garden of the house that Richard had bought in a family-friendly community in Westchester, close to Celia and the world where Valentina felt at home, they got married. Leo was the page boy. Mr. Johnson was the guest of honor, and even Helena Vasconcelos attended, having finally understood that her son's happiness was more important than social appearances. At the church, when Richard said "I do" to Valentina, he knew he was saying yes to a life of true meaning. And when Valentina said "I do" to him, she was accepting that she deserved to be loved, that her kindness was indeed a treasure worth celebrating. Because sometimes love appears unexpectedly in the simplest places, between people the world insists on separating. And when that love is true, it has the power to transform not only 2 lives, but all those who witness its purity. Dear listeners, we hope that Valentina and Richard's story has touched you deeply, reminding us that true love knows no social barriers, and that the kindness of the heart is the greatest of all riches. To continue this emotional journey with us, we have prepared a special collection of equally engaging stories about people who found true love in the most unexpected moments. You can find these narratives here next to, each of them exploring the complexity and beauty of human relationships. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Daily, we bring authentic stories that celebrate the strength of love, overcoming adversity, and the beauty of finding someone who truly sees us. Don't miss our next content, and we look forward to you in the comments sharing your own experiences about encounters that changed your lives.